the principle of intrinsic drive and the autonomy mandate. The foundational motivational operating system. The foundational irreducible truth derived from this body of work, most explicitly detailed in Drive and structurally supported by Free Agent Nation and the implicit career advice in Johnny Bunko, is the principle of intrinsic drive. This principle asserts that humanity operates on a motivational operating system, MOS 2.0, that is fundamentally incompatible with the outdated extrinsic contingency model, MOS 1.0, also known as the carrot and stick approach. The shift from a mechanical age economy to a conceptual age economy has rendered the old system not only ineffective for complex creative work, but often actively detrimental to performance, well-being, and ethical behavior. The foundational breakdown of MOS 1.0, the inefficiency of extrinsic rewards. The first principle of this synthesis is the collapse of the SR, stimulus response economy. The works collectively establish the empirically verifiable truth that for any task requiring even rudimentary cognitive skill, creativity, or conceptual thinking, conditional if-then rewards diminish performance. This is the bedrock on which all subsequent arguments about work and career are built. The books prove that external motivators inherently narrow focus, stifle innovative problem solving, the exact skills needed in the conceptual age, as explored in A Whole New Mind, and corrupt the internal moral compass, often leading to corner cutting, or short-term thinking that generates long-term organizational and personal regret, the power of regret. The old reward structure is an artifact of the industrial age, effective only for simple, repetitive, algorithmic tasks, which are precisely the tasks now being automated or outsourced. Therefore, clinging to MOS 1.0 is a fundamental error in design, an error in psychology, economics, and ethics. The components of MOS 2.0, the triad of intrinsic drive. The cohesive narrative asserts that the new and necessary motivational operating system is powered by three innate human needs that, when satisfied, produce the highest levels of engagement, performance, and well-being. This triad is a mandatory prerequisite for survival and excellence in the modern economy, and it applies equally to the individual free agent nation, and the employee within an established structure. Autonomy, the mandate of self-direction. The most crucial element of the new MOS is autonomy, the universal need to direct one's own life. The books argue that this is the non-negotiable prerequisite for high-performance work. Autonomy is not just about scheduling. It must encompass four essential realms of professional life, forming the Q model of autonomy. Task, the ability to choose what to work on, e.g., 20% time models. Time, the ability to choose when to work, flexible work, rows, results-only work. Environments, the structural underpinning of free agent nation. Technique, the ability to choose how to execute the task, trust in process. Team, the ability to choose with whom one collaborates. The synthesis demonstrates that the free agent nation is merely the structural economic expression of the individual's psychological mandate for autonomy. When organizations fail to provide it, individuals seek it independently, driving the fragmentation and rise of the gig and freelance economy. Johnny Bunko implicitly advises the young worker to seek autonomy over traditional metrics like security or prestige. Mastery, the drive for infinite improvement. The second component, mastery, is the non-terminal, asymptotic desire to get better at something that matters. This drive is inherently satisfying precisely because it is impossible to achieve fully. The goal recedes with every step taken. This continuous, effortful engagement is the engine that transforms the abstract conceptual age skills, a whole new mind, into tangible value. Mastery requires the individual to remain in a state of flow, a challenging, immersive experience where the task difficulty matches the individual's skill level. The pursuit of mastery demands deliberate practice, patience, and a long-term temporal orientation where daily micro-regrets, the power of regret, are converted into necessary learning data. Mastery is the intrinsic counterpoint to the short-term instant gratification failures induced by the extrinsic reward system. Purpose, the contextual frame for motivation. The third and highest level component is purpose, the craving to serve, something larger than oneself. This principle provides the context and direction for both autonomy and mastery. It answers the fundamental question of why the effort matters, a question that the self-correction mechanism of regret, the power of regret, often forces the individual to confront. Purpose-driven motivation is a non-monetary resource that protects the individual and the organization from the moral erosion inherent in maximizing only profit. The synthesis reveals that the most resilient organizations and the most successful movers to sell as human are those whose purpose transcends transaction. Purpose elevates work from a job to a calling, the synthesis of career structure, free agent sovereignty. The collective wisdom of these books mandates a shift in the individual's psychological relationship to their career. The collapse of the traditional ladder model, Johnny Bunko, and the rise of decentralized work, free agent nation, is not merely an economic shift, it is a consequence of the autonomy mandate. The individual is expected to become their own Chief Motivation Officer, CMO, designing a life that optimizes for the intrinsic triad rather than optimizing for external validation. The free agent is the sovereign individual who, having internalized the principles of MOS 2.0, manages their own timing when, evaluates their own effectiveness through self-corrective regret, the power of regret, and applies their conceptual skills, a whole new mind, in flexible, high-value engagements. The career path is no longer a linear climb but a series of high-concept, project-based pivots, driven by the relentless pursuit of mastery within a chosen purpose. The ultimate career failure is not financial, it is the regret of opportunity, the remorse over a life lived in silent obedience to an obsolete motivational system. This synthesis thus provides both the psychological foundation, drive, and the sociological context, free agent nation, for the new world of work. The principle of conceptual synthesis and human-centric communication, the new value equation. The second irreducible principle uniting the books defines the 21st century value equation by determining what skills are rewarded and how those skills must be deployed to influence others. This principle, primarily drawn from a whole new mind and its active application into Sell is Human, posits that the global economy has moved from the information age, dominated by logic, analysis, and data, to the conceptual age, dominated by creativity, empathy, and meaning. Success is now dictated by the ability to synthesize, connect, and communicate value through human-centric, non-algorithmic means. The rise of the right brain. The 6 conceptual senses. The synthesis identifies a structural economic certainty. High-concept HC and high-touch HT skills are the non-automatable, non-outsourceable human anchors of value. The traditional left brain skills, those associated with sequential processing, data analysis, and logical argument, are now necessary, but no longer sufficient. They have become commodities. The foundational truth is that value resides in the 6 conceptual senses, which represent the required skill synthesis for modern effectiveness. Design, moving from function-only utility to creating beauty, uniqueness, and elegant form. Story, the ability to contextualize facts and data into narratives that resonate, rather than relying on argument alone. Symphony, the ability to see the big picture, synthesize disparate parts, and recognize emergent patterns, the core of strategic thinking. Empathy, the capacity to feel with others, crucial for understanding needs, motivations, and pain points, essential for successful moving into Sell is Human. Play, the integration of humor, lightheartedness, and joy into work and life, fostering creative engagement, a key element of intrinsic motivation and drive. Meaning, the ability to provide transcendent context, to connect the product, service, or interaction to a larger purpose. These six senses represent the irrefutable new currency of the economy. The individual who masters these conceptual senses possesses a cognitive advantage that is protected from the forces of automation and globalization. The new human mandate. Everyone is a mover. The second layer of this principle is the active application of these conceptual skills to the task of moving others. To sell is human. The synthesis reveals a truth about human interaction. Due to the decentralization of information and the collapse of the traditional buyer beware hierarchy, the function of sales has disappeared, but the need for non-sales persuasion, or moving others, has exploded. The foundational principle here is the ascendance of clarity over access. In the information age, the seller had access to information the buyer lacked. In the conceptual age, everyone is drowning in information, making clarity the scarce resource. Therefore, the essential role of the modern mover is to curate, synthesize, symphony, and frame story information so the recipient can make a decision. The ultimate truth is that we are all in the business of teaching, framing, and nudging. The ABC of moving others, synthesis of conceptual skills in action. The works condense the essence of effective moving into a new triad that replaces the antiquated ABCs, always be closing, attunement, the application of empathy, the ability to see the world from the other's perspective, necessary to understand their needs and their regret of inaction, the power of regret. Attunement is the prerequisite for all non-manipulative influence. Buoyancy, the application of play and autonomy, the ability to stay afloat in the face of constant rejection. Buoyancy requires the intrinsic strength derived from the MOS 2.0 triad, making failure an external event that cannot penetrate the inner core. Autonomy. Clarity, the application of symphony and design, the capacity to frame the situation, not by solving an obvious problem, but by identifying a latent or unrecognized problem, the problem finder over the problem solver. The goal is to move the recipient from a state of informational noise to a state of decisive action through elegant framing. The ultimate principle derived from this fusion of a whole new mind and to sell is human is that humanity is the new scarce resource. The only way to survive the economic shift is by doubling down on the very qualities that make us human. The ability to create meaning, to feel, empathy, and to connect ideas, symphony. This is the new value equation. The principle of temporal and emotional optimization, the science of effective action. The final irreducible principle synthesizes the scientific findings on human effectiveness, asserting that peak performance, sustained motivation, and effective judgment are not merely matters of willpower, but are governed by predictable, verifiable temporal and emotional architectures. This principle, rooted in the research presented in When and the prescriptive self-correction mechanism in The Power of Regret, establishes that timing is an applied science and regret is a functional feedback mechanism. Temporal optimization. The science of when. The foundational truth of temporal optimization is that when is just as important as what and how. Human effectiveness is not a flat line. It follows distinct, predictable chronological patterns, biological, seasonal, and life cycle-based, that must be respected for successful action. Ignoring these patterns is an error of temporal hubris. The chronobiological mandate, peaks, troughs, and recoveries. The synthesis asserts that the human day follows a non-negotiable peak-trough rebound sequence for most people, larks, morning types, which must dictate the allocation of tasks. Peak, morning. The time for analytic work, tasks requiring focus, vigilance, and non-algorithmic problem solving, e.g., the mastery tasks defined in the MOS 2.0. Trough, early afternoon. The time for menial, administrative work, tasks requiring low cognitive load and rote execution, the algorithmic tasks that MOS 1.0 was designed for. Rebound, late afternoon, early evening. The time for conceptual high-touch work, tasks requiring creative problem-solving, synthesis, symphony, or empathetic communication, attunement. This principle dictates that effectiveness is achieved by matching the cognitive task demand to the chronotype's energy state. All attempts at pushing through the trough are acts of self-sabotage. Furthermore, the synthesis extends this chronobiological pattern to social and institutional timing. Midpoint management. The trough is structurally replicated in any long-term project's midpoint, a time when motivation sags, a risk to autonomy and mastery. Successful action requires a conscious midpoint jolt, a strategic intervention to refocus or pivot the goal. Endings and beginnings. All human endeavors are evaluated by their endings. The end effect dictates that our actions leading up to a finish, a project deadline, a sales presentation, must be imbued with meaning and designed to resonate, meaning our design. New beginnings, first days, are naturally imbued with motivational power, autonomy, purpose, and this energy must be strategically captured. Emotional optimization, the science of regret. The second pillar of this final principle establishes regret as a functional, indispensable tool for self-correction. The prevailing social narrative views regret as a debilitating emotion to be avoided. The Pinkian synthesis reframes it as data, a painful but mandatory feedback mechanism that informs the pursuit of a purposeful life. Ignoring regret is an error of emotional avoidance. The 4 core regrets, the blueprint for a purposeful life. The systematic analysis of thousands of regrets reveals 4 universal categories, which collectively form the mandate of the unlived life foundation. Regrets. Regrets over failing to do the steady, disciplined work, small failures of discipline, health, and financial prudence. This validates the need for temperance and routine, core to mastery. Boldness regrets. Regrets over failing to take the leap, speak up, or try a new path, the if only I had regrets. This validates the need for courage, a necessary component of autonomy. Moral regrets. Regrets over acting unjustly, unkindly, or out of alignment with one's ethics. This directly validates the need for purpose and the ethical constraints of the new MOS. Connection. Regrets. Regrets over failing to reach out to or mend relationships. This validates the need for high-touch empathy and attunement. The final, synthesized truth is that regret is the shadow cast by a purposeful life. The highest form of effectiveness is achieved not by eliminating regret, but by converting retrospective regrets, past errors, into prospective regrets, anticipating future errors to guide present action. This process allows the individual to use emotional data to refine their path toward autonomy, mastery, and purpose, ensuring that the conceptual age skills are deployed at the perfect time and with the maximum ethical impact. The combination of temporal science and emotional accountability creates the blueprint for sustained personal and professional excellence.